I was wondering because you mentioned earlier the difference between soul and self, and that's been sitting there, and I think that's always one that many people
that's good.
It's
worth speaking to, and it's going to sound pedantic at one level, but there's a reason we came to that here at the Institute. We wanted to talk about self as the ontological reality, as that individual identity, and at the same time our interconnectedness to all things, all people, the self. And rather than talking about soul, and I'm going to make the distinction now, and then I'll talk about soul afterwards, if that's right. So we, in the Institute, and we came to it because we wanted a much clearer working model of working with self. And so we use soul to describe the experience of self in matter. So the experiencer of self. So what comes with soul in the way we talk about it are a lot of feelings, empathy, anxiety, but it's the soulfulness of trying to live or connect to self in our lives. Now that distinction is really powerful for us. Am I clear?
Yes.
Carry on, yeah.
Right, okay, good. Soul is used in soul in the church, in other religious systems. Soul points towards what we call self, but it doesn't. James Hilman is brilliant psychotherapist. You know, he founded he worked as head of the Jungian Institute in Zurich before he founded his own archetypal psychology movement. Hilman is brilliant talking about soul, but he never goes to self, because inherent in what Hilman's doing, he talks about in that wonderful book, you know, the Revisioning Psychology, and in that book it's very Baroque, it's very complex, but he really understands soul making. And soul making is all about building a field of feelings, emotions around living. But at no point does he go towards that being, the self, towards spirit and spirituality. And that for me is a very good example of that difference. I know some centers, I know Hardy's book, you know, Psychology with the Soul, that's great, but it doesn't speak to self. And inherent in self, as you know, is also the will. As we approach self, as we open to self, we realize the self is always expressing itself, is always looking to become. Now that's very important, because that implies that there is always the will of the self. So as I open to self, I realize I have a choice. Soul making doesn't do that. Soul making will help us open to that possibility of a bigger space, of a bigger world, but doesn't evoke will.
So if I've understood it correctly, is soul almost like a prism through which you're having a set of experiences, but the self is above that and behind that.
But what is it that's impressing that prism? What is it that's bringing light to that prism? And the colours, right? And I think that's a great metaphor, Jamie, it really is. Exactly. So that's how we use it. And
it's a light prison.
It's
a light prison.
Yeah, true. And we, as you know, we work with, in terms of working with soul, we work with symptom and soul. So rather than trying to fix a symptom or just saying, what's the meaning of that, we get our therapists, counsellors to travel with the symptom and not to fix it. And where symptom tends to lead us, as you know, is to the experience of soul. And it tells us much more about who we are, and that connects us to self.
And I think also, just when I was, I think you referred to James Hilman as very Baroque, and he is. The language is wonderful, but it has that effect of taking you out of a concrete understanding of experiences and like concrete mind,
Absolutely.
and allowing you to float a
Yes.
bit. And I think that's the beauty of trying to understand that soul level, is you are in that floating stage.
I think he's brilliant at that.
Mm.
I think he is, and I mean, he was challenged, I think one of the later books, I forget what it was, where he's in an interview. Do you remember that interview? He's challenged there, but he still won't do it. He still won't go beyond it. I mean, he's very categoric, you know, where he talks about 100 years of psychotherapy and the cult of the child. It's brilliant, because he's talking about, you know, the limitations of analysis. But he never quite, and I felt, when I listened to him before he died, I would always think, God, you're saying things. Just go reach a bit further. I'm not saying we're right, but certainly the experience was he had so much.
There is more.
Absolutely, there's more. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
You know, absolutely fascinating.
So I wanted to acknowledge you, Roger, really, for your amazing contribution, you know, of having, you know, founding the Institute with your wife,
Yeah.
Joan,
Couldn't
51 years ago.
have done it alone. I mean that. I'm really serious. I mean, her role in this has been unbelievable. You'll see that when you talk to her. But
Yeah, we'll
just
have her next.
incredible.
If she.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And but I want to acknowledge like what you're describing about Assagioli, his presence, and that's how I feel about you, your presence and your energy. And when I first came to the Institute, I was quite impressed with how the teachers hold like 14, 16 of us in the group, and stay with each of us in every check-in, check-out, pop, and really stay and see the self and the being there individually and collectively, and bring it all together. It's just a skill, and I was like mesmerized. And then when we had you for the first time, I was so amazed, really, you know, with the simplicity, your humility and simplicity, and just felt so held and so seen. And so I want to acknowledge you for this incredible work, for providing and supporting our teachers to be here teaching for us.
They're special
for
people.
Us. They are.
That faculty, they're unbelievable.
Yeah.
And they go through hell in their training because they have years more to become trainers. But thank you. That's very gracious of you to say that.